Thank you for listening to the Mujeres Create podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Mujeres Create podcast. Thank you for joining me on the Behind the Success series. This is part 4. And now we're getting into the serious part. And the serious part is negotiating. I'm calling this episode Recognizing Your Value and Negotiating with Courage. So, in the last episode, I talk about the time that I was ready to leave NBCU. I applied to a job at Yahoo, didn't get the job. A few months later, I ended up getting hired by Hulu. Getting hired at Hulu came a lot of really difficult decisions. The first was leaving NBCU, a place that was so familiar for me and a place where I grew my entire career from entry level all the way to an experienced salesperson. It's definitely a workplace experience that is very near and dear to my heart. But, that time came to leave the company. And I would say that this was the first experience that I had, which was a very difficult negotiating experience for me because I had never done it before. When I got that first job at NBC as a sales assistant, I had no idea that you could even negotiate your salary. I took the job as a sales assistant, and obviously the pay, as I mentioned, was very low. And at 23, entry level, the expectation is not really to make a lot of money, right? And then when I moved over to sales planner, I had a mentor, and she was talking to me about negotiating, but I was still so green because my promotion from assistant to planner happened very quickly. So I didn't feel confident in asking for more money. And then when I got to be an account executive, I mentioned how my salary went from X amount to almost triple because I was now becoming a salesperson. And even though they tripled my salary, it wasn't really that much. A salesperson, can make a really good amount. It's a career that pays really well. But because I was such a rookie, I had no experience. I also had only been at the company 2.5 years. And also because I was also shocked myself with the amount of money that I was going to be making, that it did not occur to me that I could negotiate my salary. As I was now 8 years into my career, 5 years into being a salesperson, I did ask for a salary up increase, and I got it. I had mentors that were definitely very bold and guiding me in some of those decisions, but I was still kind of like on my own trying to figure out what that meant for me. So when the Hulu job came about, that was the first time that I was up against a big negotiation, something that I had never done before. So when they offered me the job, the salary they offered me was good. It was definitely higher than the salary that I was making as an account executive at Telemundo. But it wasn't. It felt like, okay, maybe this is really low. I'm going to a new company. This is tech. I had expectations of making more money. When I got that question in my head, I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. I call up my mentor. Her name is Charity. And I'm like, Charity, don't say anything to anyone. But I just got a job offer at Hulu, and this is what they're offering me. What do you think? Charity is one of the most amazing humans I've ever worked with, I've ever met. She's just, one of these women who is so bold, so confident, so amazing, and just like so unafraid. She was like, Bella, she calls me Bella, you need to ask for double that. I was like, what? Maybe she didn't say double, but she definitely say, you need to ask for at least $100,000 more. And I was like, oh my God, that sounds crazy. That sounds like something I will never get. And, she was just pushing me to ask for more. And I said, okay, let me see what I can do. I didn't ask for $100,000 more. I was really scared to do that. But I did ask for $75,000 more from what I was offered. And I got it. I also asked and this is something that my mentor guided me to. I was going to start a new company, new quarter, new business unit running Hulu Latino with zero accounts, zero market presence. It was just something that I was going to build from scratch. So my mentor Charity guided me to also ask for a guaranteed commission for that quarter that I was walking in. When you're walking into a company and you are part of your pay is commission based, you have the option to ask for a guaranteed commission structure so that when you walk in, you're not left without any type of commission compensation for that quarter. So I asked for a guaranteed commission structure for that. I think I was walking in Q4 at the end of the year. I was not going to be able to do much in a month left of the year. So I asked for that guaranteed commission. I got it. I also asked for a sign-on bonus, and I got that. And I also asked for equity. And at the time, Hulu was not offering equity anymore, so I didn't get equity. But when the company sold, I did get like a little equity bonus, which was really nice. That experience, this is the first time that I knew that, one, you can negotiate your salary. Two, you can ask for more outside of the salary that you're negotiating. There are other things that you can ask for, the bonus, the sign-on bonus. If the company that you're going to does not offer unlimited vacation like Hulu, you can ask for, more vacation. If their policy is 2-week vacation, you can ask for 4, depending on tenure in the industry, in your career. There's so many things that you can ask for. So you kind of have to take the time to sit down and like go through those things that are really important to you and ask for that. For me, at that point, 8 years into my career, pay was really huge for me. I was ready to make more money. I was ready to kind of take my career to the next level, especially because I was going to tech and I was going to have, I guess, a role that just had a different type of presence in the industry. So I'm glad that I didn't sit there by myself trying to figure this out because I didn't know where to start. So mentorship was really crucial for me in that moment. And it made a world of difference. It kind of made it more feasible for me to leave NBC and to leave that role because I knew I was going to be making more money. When I walk into my manager's office and I tell him, hey, so I got a new job, I got a new offer, and I'm going to be making more money. He definitely was surprised. Again, because around that same time, he had given me a pay increase in my position. So perhaps he thought that because my pay had increased, that I would stay there longer and that I would be happier. But this new opportunity was so monumental for me that even though I had so much loyalty, it was very hard for me to stay and leave that on the table. So, he asked me to please think through it for a whole week and really think through it, really sit down and like think about, if I was ready to leave the comfort of NBC. He asked a lot of the senior leaders at Telemundo to talk to me about staying, to try to convince me to stay. And I had those conversations with maybe 5 or 6 people. And I was really overwhelmed with the decision. There was only one person, in addition to my mentor Charity, that encouraged me to leave and take the job. Other than this one person who is also like one of my first mentors and the person that gave me the job at Mundos, his name is Joe Bernard. Only Joe Bernard and Charity Sabater encouraged me to leave NBC. Outside of them, everybody else was kind of like trying to get me to stay, and I understood why. Again, like we all had a very close-knit relationship at Telemundo. We all got along so well. It really felt like a family that we were working with. And from that standpoint, I understood why they were trying to get me to stay. And so I did for a whole week, try to figure out what I was going to do. I remember going home and feeling very overwhelmed, feeling very emotional about the decision. I cried so many days about this decision, and I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to do until one day I wake up, and this is when like all the pieces fell into place for me. I wake up and I say, wait a minute, Hulu is literally paying me almost double my salary, while Telemundo is not offering me any more money to stay. They literally are just asking me to stay based on emotion and based on loyalty. I said, I can't stay. I have to go. This is really about my career. This is about me taking this step. Even if I fail, is my decision. And I did feel a little bit disrespected that I didn't even get told, hey, we can pay you more. And so that morning I walk in and I said, I'm sorry, I'm leaving. This has nothing to do with you. This is more about me and my career. I'm confident in my decision. I'm leaving. And I left. And it definitely was a hard decision. But, in comparison to the world that I got to experience and uncover at Hulu, you can't compare that. And their relationships are still there. We're still super friends, and we're still, every time we see each other, anybody from Telemundo, we celebrate. And you don't have to lose those relationships, but you do have to understand that sometimes company loyalty is going to keep you underpaid. And that would have been the case for me. It would have kept me massively underpaid, and I wouldn't have gotten to experience all the things that I would experience at Hulu, then at Google, then at iHeartMedia. So with a lot of love, I had to part ways with NBC, and I cherish those memories so much. And it's definitely part of my career journey, and that I'm very grateful for. So that was NBC, Telemundo, Hulu negotiation. When I got to Google after Hulu, I went to Google, and we'll get into the whole workplace culture at Hulu that I experienced. This episode is more about negotiation and like the big moments where I came across that challenge with courage, right? The next time I got to negotiate a big salary, now we're going into, I had spent 5 years at Hulu. So now we're going from, getting that first job at Hulu. I ended up getting promoted at Hulu, I think twice. I was an account executive at Hulu, and then I became a sales manager. Then I jumped into run the whole multicultural division, which was larger than the Hispanic business. So I got like 2 promotions at Hulu, which was amazing because I got to make more money every time. And so 5 years into Hulu, that's when I got the opportunity to go to Google. And so the Google negotiation was wildly different. At that point, I had definitely gained so much more experience. I had become a lot more confident in my career, in my roles, in my expertise, in what I brought to the table. And I have to admit that when I went to Google, my assumption was that I was not going to get the job. Google, and we'll go into the Google experience in another episode, but getting into Google is so challenging that I never imagined that I would be able to get that job. So even when I got the offer, I was still kind of battling that. This is really not going to work out. I can't be so lucky to be at a place like Google. So I was negotiating from the standpoint of, if I don't get the job, it's okay. At least I asked. Because remember, I was so happy at Hulu that if I knew that if I didn't get the Google job, I still had a job that I was happy at and that I could still grow in. So I was kind of like in a different mentality at that point. It wasn't like I'm desperate to leave, or not that I was desperate to leave NBC, but I was really desperate for a new opportunity. I was really desperate for, wanting to get into the digital space. So I was in a different mindset than I was now at this point going to Google. So I was negotiating like I was a boss. I laugh at it now because I'm like, who the hell did I think I was? I went through 3 rounds of negotiations at Google. They came in with the first offer, which was definitely a great offer. And I said no. I asked for more money. I asked for more base pay. The commission structure is something that I couldn't do much about because it was standard for the company. But I asked for more base pay. I asked for equity. I asked for more vacation time. And, they came back and gave me a little bit more. And then I said, no, that's not enough. I went back and asked for more. And then they came back and they gave me a little bit more. And then I said, no, this is really what I'm looking for. And I gave them a number, and they came back and gave me that number on the third round. So, at that point, again, like, I think when you have the experience, when you know your value, at that point, I really knew my value. I knew that, coming from a place like Hulu, we were leading in premium video. The marketplace loved Hulu. There was never any meeting that I went to where people didn't light up when they heard the Hulu story. um, I think at that point, Hulu was exploding in terms of popularity in the advertising community, the content that was coming to the platform. It was really one of those flashy brands that all media companies were looking at and paying attention to. And Google, while they're a tech company, they're less media, they're more tech. They were definitely paying attention because at the time they were looking to really amplify their YouTube monetization. They really wanted to change the way that advertisers looked at YouTube, especially in the multicultural space. They needed someone with my expertise. Now I had not only television experience, but I also had Hulu experience. And when it came to YouTube, you need someone with that expertise to grow that business. And I knew that. And, I think I finally didn't have to lean too much into my mentors. I think I did tap into my mentor Charity for Google advice, but at that point, I was a lot more confident in myself. I knew more about my worth, and not even Google was going to tell me, no, you're not going to make the money that you want. And so that was another huge learning experience for me, my negotiation strategy. And this is where I encourage people, look at your career and look at what look at what you bring to the table, and really lean on that when you're negotiating, because they need to recognize your worth. Like, you have to recognize your worth first before any company recognizes it. And I also want to talk about one other big negotiation that I had in my career. And this is now when I went to iHeartMedia. I had spent 3 years at Google, and now I had learned so much more. So now I had television experience, I had digital video experience, I had tech performance, YouTube experience. I was unstoppable. At least I felt like I was unstoppable. And I was definitely looking to leave Google. I've talked about how hard that experience was for me, and we'll have a whole episode on Google. Again, this is all about negotiation. And so when I got the opportunity to go to iHeartMedia, it was kind of a messy process. I was in a place where I was ready to leave Google, but I also knew that I just didn't want to leave Google for any company, that I really needed to be intentional. And there had to be a very strong reason, or like a very strong proposition for me to leave Google. I had suffered so much that I wasn't about to go and suffer anywhere else. So, I definitely approached the opportunity with a level of like confidence that I never had before. It was the opportunity was to be the SVP of multicultural for iHeartMedia. I saw that, I got a LinkedIn message. This is now the third time that I get recruited. I got recruited for Hulu, I got recruited for Google, and this is now the third time that I get recruited for iHeartMedia. I get a LinkedIn message. At that point, I had never heard of iHeartMedia. I think they had changed their company name. They were Clear Channel before, and they had rebranded to iHeartMedia, but I never heard of iHeartMedia. And this executive recruiter tells me, hey, we have an opportunity to run multicultural sales at iHeart. We want to talk to you. And I'm like, this sounds interesting. I was definitely not thinking about going there because I had never heard of the company. So when I spoke to the recruiter, I kind of saw the opportunities as audio, as radio. I had never done audio before, podcasts, radio, concerts. And then as I learned more about the company, it definitely seemed like a very flashy, big company that I should go to. Then the opportunity started to kind of make more sense. And so we get into the process and we get to the point of getting an offer. And this is where there was definitely a lot of red flags for me, that I should have listened to. First red flag was, the person that offered me the role, he was the head of sales for iHeartMedia. He asked so many questions because the number that I asked for was a huge number, and it was comparable to what I was making at Google. It was, I think, a little higher than I was making at Google because I knew I wanted to leave Google and I wanted to work at iHeart. So I didn't want, like, the money part of it was not as important to me as it was when I went to Google and Hulu. I just wanted a new opportunity and I wanted to leave the company. But this man asked me so many questions. Like, I literally had to send him screenshots of my compensation at Google. He asked me questions about my level. He didn't believe that I was a level 6 at Google. It was just like the way that he scrutinized my pay and my level at Google. I should have known that that was a red flag, but I let it slide. And then when we got underway in those negotiation questions, he calls me and he says, "Hey, I want to talk to you about the role." It turns out that we don't have the SVP position anymore. We've lost the SVP position. We lost the budget for that. We have a lower position. Instead of SVP, are you willing to be a VP of multicultural sales? Like, hold up, wait a minute. I'm like, what the bleep are you talking about? But I was like, absolutely not. I applied for the SVP of sales role. I am not taking a VP of sales role. I don't care if you lost a budget. The job that I applied for is a different job. I'm not interested. And I told him no. And I remember saying, I've worked really hard in my career to allow this to happen to me. So respectfully, no. I said no. And so I was really disappointed at that point because I had been very invested in the interview process. I had, I had really got my mindset around, okay, it's time to leave Google. This is a great opportunity. I went into iHeart offices. I met the people there. I was very pleased with what I saw, outside of the red flags that I mentioned before. But I was like, no, I'm not taking a lower role just because. And it was just like very weird. The whole thing was very weird. So we kind of like stopped the conversation. This was now June 2019. A few months went by. I think we kept communication here and there, but now it's like September and he comes back and he emails me and he says, "Hey, we want to reconnect with you. We were able to get the SVP of multicultural role back into the budget. We would love to talk to you again or re-engage." And so I said, okay, I'm willing to connect. And right then and there, they offered me the SVP of sales role. The compensation of it was a little bit higher than what I was making at Google. Once again, I negotiated my salary, my base salary. I negotiated my compensation structure, which was standard for the company, but I think for SVPs, they had a little bit of wiggle room in terms of the flexibility of the percentage. I negotiated a guaranteed commission for that quarter that I was walking in. And I also negotiated vacation time, 4 weeks of vacation. And I also negotiated equity. I remember the company had just went public and I was able to negotiate the equity, and I almost didn't get the equity. When I was talking to the manager that I was going to report into, I asked about equity, and he said, "Not every manager gets equity." And you know what I said? I don't want to be the one manager that doesn't have equity, and I'm so proud of myself for that, by the way. And then a few days later, he came back and he gave me the equity. He gave me shares. And again, like, I approached that negotiation with a lot more boldness and just a lot more confidence and really standing my ground. I think that negotiation in particular was a big moment for me because I was finally able to stand on my own and really advocate for myself and really fight for what I believed in. And it's something that no one can take away from me. And it's something that I'm so proud of in my career, something that I encourage everyone to do. And, obviously knowing your limits. And with that, I want to get into the learnings. So the first one is, mastering the art of negotiation. Um, there are so many things that you can negotiate, so many things. In my case, I didn't have any special needs. I didn't have any special accommodations. I didn't have any like huge asks outside of like salary, vacation time, bonus, commissions, equity. But there are so many other things that you can negotiate. You have to look at your individual needs. You have to look at where you are in your career. You have to look at what you're willing to accept. You have to look at what's available. Ask questions. Sometimes we're just afraid to ask the questions, and just being curious, just kind of like taking the time to go through the benefits website and just see what's there, what is not there. How can I ask for something that maybe they can create for me? There's so many ways to do it. And the good news is that there's so many resources now, especially on TikTok, on YouTube, on social media. Spend time getting yourself better and learning how to master the art of negotiation, because it just makes such a huge difference. The second is, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's a key part of the process. So I recognize that negotiating is very scary. And especially when you're in a position where you really want the job, where you really want to um, just go there, get that job, especially if you've been laid off, especially if you've been looking for a new opportunity for a long time. You just want to like go and you don't want anything to like get in your way. It's very scary to negotiate. And sometimes, we have a lot to lose if we don't get that job. But when you are afraid, just tap for help. If you have mentors, reach out to me. Like, I'm happy to help you figure that out. Figure out like who can help you in this situation. Going back to social media, there's a lot of people talking about negotiating and how to do it. Be resourceful, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I know that sometimes you don't want to tell anyone, oh my God, I'm going for a new job. I don't want anyone to know. I don't want any bad energy. But just ask for help. Those people that you trust in your network, maybe they can help you figure it out. You're not alone in the process. The third lesson is your value is non-negotiable. The right employer will pay for what you are asking for. This is an important one because I hear this time and time again from Black and Latina women. They're not offering me a lot of money. They're not paying me what I'm asking for. They're not willing to go up. And sometimes, there's definitely discrimination in the process. There's bias in the process that you need to be mindful of, especially as Latinas and Black women. There's a lot going up against us. But you have to really know your worth. You really have to know that if you take the low pay, if you take the pay cut, if you take the amount that you're not happy with, your morale in that company, in that job is not going to be good. You're going to walk in there with resentment. You're going to walk in there feeling undervalued. You're going to walk in there wishing you would have asked for more, or wishing you would have pushed for more, or wishing you didn't take the job. And especially if pay is something that is very important to you, you have to really know your worth. Look at your experience, look at your accomplishments, look at what you've done at other companies, look at how you've performed in your roles, and know your worth. Know that you are worthy of pay. You are worthy of amazing things. So fight for it. On lesson number 4, this is a very important one. And this is something that is not as easy to figure out. Know when you've reached your limit on negotiation. So the company has a limit and you have a limit, right? If you are getting to a point where you really need the money, right? And they're just like giving you pennies. This is where it gets scary, right? Because you really want that job, and you kind of want to ask for more. So learn how to read the cues, right? If you go one round and they barely make it to where you are asking. Like, let's say you want to make $100,000 and you ask for $100,000 and they are like, no, what we can offer you is $60,000. That is a huge gap, right? Okay. So you know that on the next round, you can't ask for $100,000 again. Maybe you ask for $90,000 and maybe they say, okay, 65,000. So there's a huge gap that you are kind of working with. In that point, you can ask about, hey, do you have a budget, like a max budget for for the role? What is that? And then, this is where they don't have to be transparent, but maybe they are transparent and they can tell you, listen, the budget we have for the role is literally $60,000. We have no more. Then you know that it's not the role for you. So you have to kind of like ask the questions to know, okay, am I wasting my time asking for more money? Are they wasting my time not giving me the money that I'm asking for? Know when to stop, because if it's not exciting, if the offer is not exciting to you, don't waste your time negotiating with a company that is not, they don't have the money or they don't have the interest in paying you more. So you kind of have to learn how to read the cues. It's not always about just continuing to ask for more. First round, second round, third round, learn to see the cues early on in the conversation. Ask questions like, what is the budget that you have in mind for the role? Is there a scale that you're thinking about? How are you scaling me with my experience? That was the case at Google. They had a scale based on people's experience. And I asked about that. And so you can ask those questions and just figure out, am I wasting my time, or is this an opportunity here for me to just keep asking for more and see how far I can get? And then last but not least, lesson number 5, don't let fear hold you back. Your courage to ask for more changes everything. So fear, especially as a Latina, I'm the first in my family to be in these corporate spaces. I'm the first in my family to hold these type of conversations. Thinking about my first episode on the podcast about the colonized mindset, which is don't ask for more, stay quiet, take whatever you can get. Don't raise your hand, don't make too much noise. uh, those fears are real, and they were definitely there that first time I negotiated to go to Hulu and I didn't know what to do, or maybe the first role that I ever got that I didn't even know that I could negotiate. So I recognize that fear is a big part of our community. And I guarantee you, the first time I negotiated that Hulu salary, I was trembling, I was shaking. I thought I was going to lose that huge opportunity that landed on my lap. But after I said those words, after I did it for the first time, it got easier and easier and easier the other times. So on the second round, it got easier. When I went to Google, it got easier. That third round at Google got easier. That fight for my life at iHeartMedia got easier. So it's just that first time that is really hard. How can you prepare yourself for that first time? How can you say to yourself, I deserve more. I want more. I'm ready to make more. I'm not taking no for an answer. Even if you lose that job, remember, the company that wants you will hire you, no matter how that negotiation goes. If they really want you, they will pay you. You have to be willing to lose along the way. But if it means you're standing up for yourself, it's going to make a world of difference in your career. And I have to say that I'm very sensitive to people's individual needs. There are parents who can't afford the luxury of like turning down a job. There are women, men who literally need that job, and they are in a position where they can be playing around with these like negotiation games. I understand that. And this conversation is very different for those folks. I was once there, remember my first job. I just wanted the job. And I knew that first job was all about just getting in the door. So you have to differentiate the moment. And if you are in that position, go and listen to episode number 1, and you'll kind of learn a little bit more about how to navigate that situation. But if you're in a place in your career where you've been putting in the work, when you've grown, when you've learned, when you've gained experience, feel confident that it's time for you to make more and go ask for it. Thank you so much for listening to the Mujeres Create podcast. I'll see you on the next conversation on episode 5. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Mujeres Create podcast. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and don't forget to share the wisdom with other mujeres.